welcome everyone to December's Cabinet meeting, the last this year. And anyone watching at home, resident, member or officer, wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year when we get to the end of the meeting. I might come back to that. Clearly this is a physical Cabinet meeting taking place at the Town Hall, and the meeting is being live streamed. I've welcomed everyone to that live stream. Conscious that a few Cabinet colleagues obviously joining remotely. As you'll be aware, you're not formally present at the meeting and may not vote on any items under discussion, but you can obviously contribute to the meeting. Obviously, the decisions will be published after the meeting. Are we going to do a preamble around the chair? No, we're not. So standard meeting rules apply whether you're online or in the room. Please grab my attention in the usual way if you want to speak, and don't use the chat online unless you're trying to get my attention and I haven't got it. I'm also logged into the online meeting. Before beginning the meeting formally, I did just want to highlight some incredible awards won by council projects in the last couple of weeks. The supported employment team have run a recent national award. They're the incredible team that Councillor Williams politically leads that work with disabled residents and get them into supported internships, jobs and skills. And we've won numerous awards for our apprenticeship work, but it's really great to see that team rewarded. We were also at the New London Architecture Awards, where the Eastway Young Hackney Hub won I think the Wellbeing Award, which was absolutely fantastic for that piece of co-produced work in Hackney Wick, and the Britannia won its culture category, got highly commended in the Inclusion Award, and then won the overall award for the new leisure centre. So it means that it's the project of the year for New London Architecture, which I think is a fantastic achievement. And then only last week we topped that off with Veronica Ryan winning the Turner Prize, in part for her work on the first Public Windrush artwork commission. And again, that is a fantastic achievement for the borough, but also for Veronica and the teams that supported her. I'd like to highlight particularly Petra and Polly for their work, but it wasn't just confined to the culture teams, it was across council effort, and everyone that have been involved in the Britannia project have had my thanks on numerous occasions, but I think it's highly significant we've ended the year in that way for those three projects. I visited our twin town, Suren, 2 weeks ago with the Deputy Lieutenant, our current Speaker and former Speaker, Councillor Desmond, and we renewed our commitment 60 years of being twinned with the suburb of Paris. And I hope that we will see during the course of the early part of next year continued cultural exchanges with Hackney Rugby and the St John of Jerusalem Festival Chorus, who are both welcoming their opposite numbers from Suren. But a huge thanks from me to Mayor Boody for reaching out to us and recognising 60 years of twinning. As we all know, Hackney is a proudly open borough that values its European connections. Over 40,000 residents come from the EU27. And it's great to renew those ties. I suppose my final thanks, given some of the attendance challenges in the meeting, is just to thank all of our council staff who have been leading the snow response over the last 24 hours. It was probably about 24 hours ago that the snow started to fall in Hackney and across London. And whether it was gritting, whether it's about communications and information, I know huge numbers of our frontline workforce have been sort of redeployed out in street scene and waste and estate services, and have done a Herculean job of keeping our streets safe and clear of snow, and colleagues in Hackney Education coordinating the education response as well. So thanks to everyone that has been involved in that response, and there may well be further snow this evening, and obviously the brutal cold weather. I'm working very closely with Councillor Etty on our SWEP and rough sleeper response, and making sure that everyone is in. I'm not going to take any contributions at the start. I'll just move into the meeting if that's okay. So apologies for absence online. I can see that Councilman McKenzie's here online and Councilman Maxwell. Are there any other apologies for absence? Councilman McKenzie.
Yeah, apologies for not being actually present at the meeting. That's personally due to incapacitation this evening.
No, that's fine. Got your apologies, and I think Councillor Kennedy probably passes on his apologies as well. In terms of item 2, there were no urgent items of business, but there are some exempt business that will be dealt with under item 25. Is that correct? Yeah. Declarations of interest. Are there any new declarations of interest? Any items on the agenda? No. Good. Item 4 is intention to conduct business in private and make representations. I think there are some exempt items later. Yeah. So we'll deal with that when they come. In terms of questions and deputations, at the time of publication of the agenda, there were no questions or deputations received. But I know that Councillor Garbett, as leader of the Green and second opposition group on the council, does want to speak under agendas items 7, 8, 10, 11 and 12. So that's absolutely right and correct. As previously, under each item, going to limit each item to 5 minutes, including Councillor Garbett's questions and responses. So if people bear that in mind as we go through the agenda, but also I know that cabinet members will want to contribute on opening remarks. In terms of the unrestricted minutes of our previous meeting held on the 21st of November, does anyone have any amendments or suggestions? We're happy to agree them. Councillor Etty.
I sent in my apology, but I realized that has not been recorded.
Okay, we can definitely record that. Any more for any more? No? Okay, we'll agree that. Brilliant. So item 7 is capital update and property disposals and acquisitions. It's in my name. I did just want to highlight some very positive investment in terms of CCTV cameras around supporting our active travel work, a substantial new investment and making sure that we've got the flexibility to regulate both our LTNs and our school streets. We've been facing some pretty disgusting and criminal damage of some of our existing infrastructure, and I think it's really disappointing 2 years in that we're still seeing so many contraventions. But this investment and making sure that we can continue to provide access to blue badge holders and emergency services while regulating the streets in the ways that we've set out, I think is really positive. I do want to recognise some of the challenges around delivery around our GP practice development sites, and that's obviously recognised in the work. And then the fun end of the report is the investment in our new refurbished play areas in our parks, improving our facilities for young people and continued investment there, and obviously a reference across to the West Reservoir works. I do just want to acknowledge, and I think it's Councillor Garbett that spotted it in the finer detail of the report, that there is reference to the NEL CCG. The NEL CCG has now been wound up and folded into the North London Integrated Care Board arrangement, so that should be corrected in the report. Any other questions or comments? I think Councillor Coban, and then I'll bring in Councillor Garbett. Councillor Coban.
Yeah, I mean, Chair, I just wanted to sort of welcome the news on the CCTV rollout. As you know, we've been on various visits across different schools and also different low traffic neighbourhoods, speaking to lots of different residents. And obviously, this is something that has time and time out come up again, particularly around safety on some of these streets, which is an aspect that we often forget about when residents get used to a road not having as many cars, and then all of a sudden, when that camera's gone missing and people do obviously drive through, it puts children at risk, especially at our schools. And this is our effort to really make sure that compliance is at the levels it needs to be to help have the desired impact of the low traffic neighbourhoods and the school streets in the first place. So we've introduced a number of different measures in terms of looking at different lamp columns and how we protect the cameras itself. But as you rightly say, it's been quite, don't have the words to describe, the level of vandalism that we're facing. Sometimes we have vandalism within 24 hours of a new camera going up on Oldfield Road, where the Stoke Newington low traffic neighbourhood went in. Within the space of 7 months, we had the camera being replaced 6 times, which just showcases the problem that we face, and obviously that costs the Hackney taxpayer money. And so, this is a welcome new announcement. It's a great investment. Obviously, people want to see us taking action, and hopefully we'll continue into our efforts alongside CCTV, but also other ways to make sure compliance is good. And just a final point to say, the reason why the CCTV enforcement is the best course of action as opposed to physical bollards in certain instances is because obviously it allows the access for emergency vehicles, Hatsola, for example, different sorts of exemptions that with blue badge holders, for example, to be able to drive through our buses. And that's why the CCTV and NPR cameras are the best course of action moving forward.
Couldn't agree more with those statements. And again, if anyone watching knows anything about the criminal damage, I would urge them to contact the council and the police. And it's a real safety issue, especially in the context of school streets, where residents have a right to expect that those contraventions and those cameras exist. Councillor Garbett.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question about data, but I actually was at the parking offices the other week for another meeting, and they explained that they only hold the data for the vehicles, in contravention, which is really important, that we're not just collecting loads of people's data without reason. So two questions. One on something that we've advocated for is exemptions for health and social care workers, and if that's something you've ever considered. And then a longer question on the 9 play areas, which is excellent, and if the refurbishment takes into account kind of teaching risk competence. So there's evidence showing that incorporating high levels of challenge and risk in play structures permits greater motor development and thereby reduces accidents in later life. So I don't know if they're being designed around those principles.
Thanks. I'm going to bring in Councillor Coburn and then Councillor Woodley, if that's okay. Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Garbett, for the question. I think just to say, obviously, this investment that obviously we're bringing into our school streets is more of an enforcement issue as opposed to sort of the wider policy around our low traffic neighbourhood schemes and the school streets and the exemptions around that. Obviously, the council has been, for a long period of time, have been responding and engaging with residents of a wide range of exemptions. Obviously, we brought forward the blue badge exemption, but this paper specifically is obviously referring specifically to the enforcement. I'm happy to pick up a conversation with you offline about sort of the wider policy.
Thanks. Councillor Woodley.
Thanks, Councillor Garbett, for your question. One of the absolute core principles is to build in risk and adventure into the play areas. We're really proud of our adventure playgrounds across Hackney as well, so we've got a lot of learnings from there. But more than that, and more than the fun bit even that the Mayor introduced, it's also about inclusion. It's also about having access to really high quality opportunities to play in a really densely built borough where perhaps we don't have gardens or play equipment in immediate houses. It's about education that comes through play. Essentially, we want our children to learn and grow and develop as individuals and get new skills. We have a whole piece of work around design guidance for play and connection with nature. I could go on, and very, very happy to talk to you about this outside of this meeting. I also want to sort of thank all the ward members that contributed to some of the consultation process. We had school pupil forums engage with us. Stormont House Pupil Forum came out and engaged with us on Hackney Downs. We've kind of really managed to strike a balance, I think, between that sort of the natural play, boulders, all things to sort of climb on, have that risk, but also to make sure that everybody can come and enjoy those areas. And as we go on and develop more refurbishments and more play areas across the borough, we'll learn from each one as we go. So, if you have any contributions or suggestions, we'll have to take those on board.
Thank you. Is that okay? Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. We're happy to agree the report. Agreed. Thanks very much indeed. So moving on to item 8, which is the RFP. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. The 3 issues which we bring to your attention in this report tonight, and the first is the position regarding the current year's spend, and as you'll note from the report, we're 8.4 million over budget. This is regrettable, obviously, but I'd just still like to commend the work that our corporate leadership team put it, and my academic colleagues have put into making sure that this is brought under as much control as possible and is containable within the budget and our projections for next year. So, but it does illustrate the intense financial pressure that the council's under, particularly because of increasing inflation and cost pressures generally. The second item is to approve the set of service savings proposals set out in Appendix 1, which is a number of measures that we're bringing forward as part of the process to balance the budget for next year. Obviously, recommendations regarding how we'll do that and the council tax level will come to Cabinet and Council early in the new year, but at this stage we're just asking you to approve this list of service stations, which have been brought together again with a lot of effort from everyone on the council really, and I'm pleased to say we've managed to get to this list of 5.7 million for next year and a bit more for the year after, without having to resort to substantial service savings or redundancies or cuts in services. So a difficult job given the pressures, but so I commend that to you. The last item is to approve our participation in the local London business rates pool. This is in previous years the government have facilitated a pooling process which has enabled us to maximise the benefit for the share of business rates that Hackney gets. This isn't possible at the moment, but we have been able to enter into an agreement with some neighbouring boroughs to set out the local pool as set out in the report. As I said, it gives a substantial financial advantage in the share of business rates if we do this. So if I can commend those three recommendations to Cabinet. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Chapman. Any other questions or comments? No. Councillor Gobbett?
Thank you. Yeah, and just like to add my thanks to Ian and the exec team in this really difficult time. But my question's on a really specific issue, and it's in the appendix, and it's a reference to the indoor market, where it says it's as in the Ridley Road indoor market, and it says it's generating 50k for the council in 23-24. I understood it wasn't generating profit, so just wanted to understand that specific part of that, the savings appendix.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's a sorry.
Is it Councillor John Thomas or Councillor?
I was going just to say it is obviously it's a saving, and all savings go to the benefit of the council. I think the markets all property let by the council is let on the basis that it recognises the capital investment either implicitly in the asset that's being used or notionally, and it's appropriate to make a return on that. But we still will be providing a really high quality market service. I think Councillor Bajana Thomas may have a few words to add to that. If you, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Gabbett, thanks for your question. As Councillor Chapman have mentioned, the indoor market in Ridley Road, the council have invested in this building. It is a commercial building, and there is a risk associated with that investment. The rent proposed for the indoor market have been benchmarked and compared well with other markets around London in comparison to the footfall, to the desirable location, and like I mentioned, it compares favorably to other markets in London. And the increase you were talking about, the surplus is not in the first, it will come after the first 2 years, and there is a plan to review and consult with traders before that is implemented. But as I've mentioned, the council will be paying 360,000 on rental per annum, as well as 74,000 annual service charge, and that will increase with CPI in year 5. So we are investing. So it is important for the council to be able to have a return on that investment, as well as to be able to what the surplus you've seen in the budget is going to go back into the council budget, and is going to relieve burden for taxpayers in Hackney. So it's not really I know you've been working with the Ridley Road campaigner. It's not really the way it looks or it seems or the way they've been saying it. And Councillor Gabet have shared quite a couple of briefing with you around details of the indoor market. Thanks.
I've got proposed of my own that we remove this item and defer it to the next, sorry, this subject line in the appendix and defer it to the next OFP, because I've got my own concerns about this area of the budget anyway. So I don't know if that would help continue the conversation, but I think there's just something that I'm a bit unclear about here. That doesn't cut across you wanting to make your own further comment, but I would just welcome the opportunity to, where we are in Appendix 1, to postpone the market CHE indoor savings until a future meeting. Councillor Garbett.
Yeah, I'd really welcome that, because I just have a number of questions about what that means, where it be used, how that's being communicated to traders, and the fact that they are finding it incredibly difficult currently just to make any money. But yeah, I really welcome that, and I'm happy to continue that outside.
I need a seconder for that. Can you second it, Councillor Chapman? Thank you. So we approve the OFP with that small caveat around Appendix 1, which we'll bring back to a future OFP or the main budget. And I know there's already a really active dialogue from Councillor Jana Thomas with ward councillors, including Councillor Garbett and Councillor Adebayo. So with that change, can we agree the report? Thank you. So item 9, and apologies, I was not actively looking at the online exchange there because I was very focused on people in the room. But obviously item 9, the Housing Services Resident Engagement Strategy, is introduced by Councilman McKenzie, who's joining us remotely this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. The report in front of you sets out the results of our extensive work to devise a new resident engagement strategy for housing services. To start off, I must say I'm very proud of the extent of consultation that's been in forming this final report, with the views of many thousands of our residents sought through various methods, including surveys, focus groups, street and estate events, and outreach sessions to seldom heard communities. We have also been greatly benefited from the active collaboration from the Resident Liaison Group co-chairs, Steve Webster and Helder da Costa, who along with myself have acted as project champions for this work. Also the feedback from our resident scrutiny group, which met regularly throughout the development of this strategy process, and for the sterling efforts of our resident participation team and our communication teams. Last but not least, the valuable input from many councillors who contribute to our workshop sessions during the course of the summer. Thank you. My thanks goes to everyone. Because of this approach we have taken, I'm confident the 5 priorities we relate to proposal for the resident engagement strategy accurately reflect what matters most to residents. And my genuine hope is that successful implementation to make a real difference to resident satisfaction in the next 3 years. Those 5 priorities include to embed resident first culture across the service, to support our involved resident groups to thrive, to widen the ways in which residents can engage with us, to ensure that residents can influence decisions making and drive service improvements, to promote engagement activity that strengthens our communities. I know and I accept the implementation of these proposals will be a challenge to the current ways of working, and there's still very much to do to get housing services right. Our expectation is, with all the financial and wider pressures facing the service, the new resident engagement strategy will help improve the way in which we engage with our residents, and that we will be in a better place to navigate our way through these difficult challenges together with residents. It will also provide valuable tool to drive forward the changes in culture and service performance that are so critical to the success of housing services, and indeed the council as a whole. Mayor Glanville, I'd like to commend this resident engagement strategy to Cabinet and hope that we can all work together for its successful implementation.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. I just wanted to highlight the immense efforts of housing services to do this work, to engage with residents, to organise the drop-ins, to go out onto estates, especially in that period as we were sort of restoring our services and our face-to-face work. I think there's a huge amount of rich insight in the Cabinet report and the direction of travel. I think it's something that everyone involved in its co-production, whether they've been resident, officer or member, can have a huge amount of pride in, as Councillor McKenzie has suggested, and they have my thanks as Mayor. Do we wish to debate further the report? No. Well, can I entrust Ricardo with taking back our thanks to the service along with Councillor McKenzie? It's a hugely brilliant piece of work. I certainly valued the drop-in and the contact with frontline officers that I took part in, and there's some really exciting building blocks for how we work with our residents in the weeks, months and years ahead. Happy to agree the report? Agreed. Fantastic. Item 10, which is in Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Ete's name, is the Housing Services Community Flat proposal for change of use. I think, Councillor Ete, you were going to start as you were in the room, or is it Councillor, and then Councillor McKenzie is going to come in afterwards?
And Councillor McKenzie can come in afterwards. We're all aware that with regards to our housing crisis, we have about 8,500 on housing register. We have about 3,300 in temporary accommodation, and amongst this, we have over 1,000 that are living in temporary accommodation outside the borough. So it is against this backdrop that this report sets out the proposal to revert a number of community flats within housing services, community halls portfolio back to their intended use as council homes. And as the report indicates, subject to planning consent, this has the potential to create much needed accommodation for up to 11 households who we may otherwise be forced to house outside of the borough. With the cost of building a new council home exceeding £300,000 and the cost of temporary accommodation rising rapidly, it also offers us a cost-effective and rapid way to meet the housing needs of people who will be in significant housing needs. In proposing this, we recognize that the community flats have historically played an important role in providing meeting and office space for tenants and residents association, and that some continue to do so. However, changing patterns of use mean that around half are no longer used, and some have now been standing for a number of years. In the current climate, this is not acceptable. The small size of the flats also means that most cannot accommodate the sort of activities and projects that many residents and community groups value. So both myself and Councillor McKenzie strongly believe that the proposal set out in this report will be beneficial for the council and, most importantly, some of our most vulnerable residents with high levels of housing needs. And it will additionally provide us the opportunities to make better use of other communities' facilities in close proximity to these flats. Thereby, the Cabinet goes the recommendation to approve the decision to revert 6 community flats that are no longer in use by tenants and resident associations back to council housing, subject to applications for planning concept being successful. To agree that final decisions on the future use of 4 community flats and a studio flat that are still in use by tenants and residents association be made on a case-by-case basis, taking into account feedback from users, the availability and suitability of alternative meeting spaces, the wider housing pressure facing the borough, and the outcome of the planning decision. Thirdly, to approve delegation of the final decisions on the future use of those flats still used by tenants and resident associations be delegated to the strategic director of housing, and to agree that any homes returned through this work will be let in accordance with the council's lettings policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Etienne. I know it's been a really passionate piece of work from yourself and Councillor McKenzie. Councillor McKenzie, do you want to add to that?
Chair, on the basis of what Councillor Etienne has set out, I don't think I have anything further to add. I think she's covered all the points which I would raise from my side.
Thank you. Again, thanks from me. This piece of work once sat with me, and you've both unlocked it as the current cabinet members. Finding those hidden homes on our estates and returning to use, I know has a really important contribution to make to improving our housing supply. And so thank you again for that, and the officers that have been involved. I understand, Councillor Garbutt, you had some questions. Councillor Garbutt.
Yeah, only quick questions, and agree, this is a really brilliant proposal. But yeah, and you touched on the consultation. I just wondered if there'd been any consultation with the groups yet, or if this is just new. And then if they're going to be offered space at the same kind of use, if you know what I mean, like will they get to use it for free, and will they be able to get a permanent space in some of those the alternative spaces? Thanks.
Thank you. Who's best to answer that, Councillor McKenzie or Councillor Etienne? Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Glanville. To answer your question, Councillor Garbutt, yes, no, we haven't actually taken out discrete discussions with the 5 TRAs in question to date. Our commitment is to carry out that consultation early in the year. In terms of resources and facilities which will be made available to them, it will only be improvement of the existing facilities have at the moment, because what will be on offer are actually proper community tools with all the range of facilities they have from there. And the second part of your question, in terms of cost, of course, we won't be charging anything to relocate or to use their access to facilities. I must stress that.
Thanks, Councillor Etienne.
In addition to just to let you know that the 9 wards that are affected, all the councillors have been, and we've had meeting with the councillors, and they're quite aware of it. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Are we happy to agree the report? Agreed. Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Nicholson, item 11, the housing strategy position paper.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Glanville. Mayor Glanville, we're coming to the end of the 2018 adopted housing strategy that the council adopted. We're coming to that kind of end of that kind of sort of sensible period through which the housing strategy, I would suggest, has served the borough well, it's served residents well, and it has delivered some very, very impressive outcomes in regards to the building of new homes around the borough, led by the council and certainly financed by the council from various different sources. Now, before we progress as part of our administration's focus on the development of a new housing strategy, it must, of course, be evidence-based. And that evidence this time around is to come from the results of the census. And those results, as I'm sure we're all aware in the chamber, are still in the process of being released to all of us for our use. And it is very important that this evidence is gathered and then processed and put into a context. That context is known as SHMA for short, the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. But it is a rather vital document because it describes all of the challenges that residents are facing in regards to housing needs, the demand for housing, and it also explains some of the challenges around housing and the borough, and affordability particularly, and access to decent homes, quality homes, both in the public sector and in the private sector, and in the third sector, so those housing association partners, for example. So all of this information needs to be gathered, compiled and placed into the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. That then enables us to develop the next housing strategy over the course of 2023, and the target is to adopt in 2024. Forgive me, Mayor Glanville, but my reason for just taking us all through this sort of rather protracted journey, which is all about policy making, is very, very pertinent and relevant to the position paper that is before us this evening. For want of a better way of describing it, this is a bridging piece of policy that will bridge between the previous housing strategy and the new one to come. So basically what it does is it takes those adopted themes and objectives that were adopted formally in 2018, and it starts just to update to the current circumstances. And indeed, the introduction itself sets out some of those significant changes that have taken place over the course of the last few years. Everything from the United Kingdom leaving the European Union through to a pandemic, and the list goes on. I'll point to section 1.3 in the introduction, which sort of describes all of those various different pressures building down. And this enables us to be able to conform to the Greater London Authority, the Mayor of London's housing strategy. That is very important, as that is one partner in the delivery of new homes in the borough. It enables us to keep, shall we say, the policy reasonably fresh and relevant and pertinent to today's circumstances and to today's demands. The paper, therefore, is set out this evening for us to formally adopt and to take the position paper forward until, in due course, we adopt the new housing strategy for the council. It is as set out, and I commend the report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. Again, thanks to everyone involved in the work, from me, especially yourself, but also council officers from across the council. Are there any other questions or comments? No? Councillor Garbett.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me speak on this item. Yeah, really exciting to see this direction. One comment is just on sustainability and just making sure that in this plan and in the cover sheet, we're highlighting some of the great stuff that's happening, like we've just heard about the community flats, is about protecting the environment and how we are trying to repurpose empty buildings and things like that. So we just need to make sure that that's at the forefront, and that's just a comment. So I have a couple of questions. One's on how you're still considering shared ownership to be affordable and what analysis of Hackney's population that's based on. Hackney's funding from the London Mayor to build is less than other boroughs. Why is this? And one point around lobbying for rent controls, which is obviously we all know is hugely important to protect our private renters, which was in your manifesto, but it's not commented on in this strategy. And then shifting beyond a partial retrofit programme to a fully committed retrofit programme. So just a few.
Deputy Mayor Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Glanville. Thank you, Councillor Gabbard, for those questions. In regards to the shared ownership question that I think you kind of just asked there about how affordable is shared ownership in the borough for borough's residents to actually take advantage of that particular tenure type. As I'm sure you're aware, Councillor Gabbard, we have a mayoral inquiry coming forward in the coming year, which is designed to exclusively look at that in today's times. 5 years ago, shared ownership and the value of shared ownership was clearly in a very, very different place. The economy has changed quite profoundly since that time, and it is for that reason that this mayoral inquiry will be coming forward. It will be looking at the shared ownership and the affordability of shared ownership to those residents of Hackney. It will be looking at all of those other tenure types that the council is bringing forward. It won't be looking at social rent, and it won't be looking at outright sale, but it will be looking at Hackney living rent. It will be looking at the shared ownership offer and actually feeding that back into the community, and then being able to understand and indeed the census data will play a great role in providing the most up-to-date information and analysis of those challenges that residents face in terms of housing affordability. In terms of your next question, which I think was about protecting the environment, you made a comment just about ensuring that actually as much reuse and upcycling of empty homes is done, rather than, say, I think the demolition, for example, and the rebuilding of new homes. And indeed, that's exactly the approach taken by the council. Councillor Gabbard, it looks first to see if indeed it can repurpose, and indeed this evening we had an example of that in an earlier report about repurposing new spaces or old spaces that for one reason or another may have fallen into disuse. That is always at the front of the mind. What I would also add on a more wider kind of proposition is the council coming forward with a major retrofit project. That retrofit project is looking at producing the next generation of refit and refurbishment to create net zero homes for the borough. The homes that the council owns itself, and that first Pathfinder project will be taking place and be initiated over the course of the next year. It is, I'm sure you would agree, a prudent approach to try and establish amongst all of the different building typologies of the some 20, 30,000 homes that the council actually owns, the different nuanced responses to create homes that are quality, fit to live in, and indeed are net zero homes for the future. And bearing in mind, Councillor Gabbard, that nearly 80% of those homes that are currently in existence will still be there in 2050. And that is a rather sobering fact that retrofit must sit at the front of the administration's net zero objectives, and that's exactly where it sits. I hope that kind of answers that question. In terms of the Mayor of London and grant, I think you mentioned that at the end. The most recent grant award was for £17.5 million. What that does is that it provides £175,000 for 100 new homes, homes that don't exist at the moment in Hackney. And the council asked for that £17.5 million and it got it. And that kind of sits well within the housing's delivery projections for the current programme. The next item on the agenda looks to the future, and it looks to a programme of building 1,000 council homes. And that paper, as I'm sure the Mayor will sort of touch upon, obviously looks again to all of those different places where funding can be found. One of those places is the Mayor of London. But let's not lose sight of the fact the Mayor of London is hamstrung, Councillor Gabbard. He is hamstrung because he receives next to no government grant to build affordable houses in our capital city. And that plays out on the streets of Hackney as it does in every single London borough. A government that sees affordable rent at 80% of market value is not talking about the same levels of affordability that as a council and as an administration we wish to bring forward and indeed already preside over. Rents in the order of 16 to 17% of market. That is true social affordable rent in central London today. And that's what we're focused on. Thank you, Mayor Glamber.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Nicholson. I'm going to bring in Councillor Emo, I think, on the private rented and the campaigning around rent control. But just before then, just that point about retrofit, I think we've been really clear in this paper and probably even clearer in the next one, that we are going to keep all our promises to our regeneration estates about demolition and rebuild. There's no place for retrofit on the existing stock at Woodbury Down or Colville. It's absolutely right. We made promises over a decade ago to those residents for a brand new home in their community at social rent, and we will deliver on that. Absolutely, though, in terms of the rest of the stock, retrofit has a massive part to play. And as you outlined, we would, we've had that political debate on numerous occasions in wards, at the borough elections, in mayoral hustings. It is utterly wrong to ever say to any of those residents on regeneration estates, we should pause those regenerations. It'd be a total betrayal of everything that we stand for and the promises that we've made, and we will never do it as long as we have a Labour administration in Hackney. Councillor O'Meara.
Found one that works. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Garbett. I'll be really brief, but just to say that in addition to the response I gave at full council about some of the work that the private sector housing team had been doing to support other parts of the council, particularly around Homes for Ukraine and other pieces of work, we have been, or so, rather they have been going through some fairly fundamental staff changes, which I'm pleased are pretty much at their conclusion, and the work around our campaigning will continue and will restart apace. One of the issues with the hiatus in the last couple of months has also been the lack of a Secretary of State, a stable one at least, to target some of that work to. And so I'll be very happy to update all members of the council on the work that we will be restarting. I've just met today with officers to look at what we'll be doing from the new year with regards to delivering on the private rented sector part of the housing strategy. And you're right, those commitments around lobbying and campaigning with new comms support and new strategic support from officers in the council. We're really happy to pick that up in the new year. So I will bring that forward to members in due course.
Thanks, everyone. Are we happy to agree the direction of travel? Agreed. With the note, there's a lot of work to come from the SHMA to the engagement around the Commission to constructing a co-produced strategy and across council as well. I think we've only just begun. Thanks, everyone. So item 12 is the new council house building programme, 1,000 homes for social rent. In my name, but a true partnership between myself, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, Councilman McKenzie, Councillor Etty and others, and just to acknowledge the cross-cutting nature of this work, but also the cross-cutting nature with officers. Huge thanks to Ian Williams, Ricardo Hyatt, Stephen Haynes, Rachel Bagnall, who's here, Chris Carthy, who's here, Chris Trowell, who's James Goddard, and James Mollison and others that are online, Diana Hall, and Ruth Angel, a real, Herculean effort from across the council, not only in project delivery, but in the thinking and how we got to this point. So that's my opening remarks. This does represent a huge political and financial commitment to council housing in Hackney. It keeps that commitment to existing projects, renews it and enhances it. The 1,000 homes is made up of several tranches of work, including delivering on existing schemes that we have planning permission for, but are not yet on site. It then talks about additional investment in improving the tenure mix on a new house building programme, and the 15 sites that are referred to that we've started already resident co-production to sort of bring forward. And that's where we see that 75% council housing to 25% social rent. And then I think we also talk about, excitingly, the opportunities in our mixed-use town centre schemes to deliver social and council housing in those schemes, including at Morning Lane, and makes that commitment really clear about delivering social rent there. It does have all of the financial challenges that Councillor Chapman talked about in the OFP, financial pressures on the council, the impacts of inflation, interest rates, construction cost inflation, all make the delivery of a single unit, never mind 1,000 units of new council housing, much more difficult than it has been, but that does not dim our commitment to high quality new council housing in the borough, as you'll see from the report. To get political, this was a signature part of the Labour administration's manifesto that we all stood on in 2022, 1,000 units of new council housing. This report, as we finish the year, sets out not only that commitment and makes it a council commitment, but also how we will do it and how we will do it across those phases. I'm incredibly proud to bring it this evening, but as I say, huge thanks to all of the officers that I know believe passionately in delivering new council housing, and also the cabinet colleagues that have helped lead the political response. I don't know if Deputy Mayor Nicholson, if you wanted to add anything more to that in terms of introduction.
I won't, Mayor Glanville. That's a great intro. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Garbett, you might have had some questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, also just really, commend the commitment in this paper to the 1,000 social rent homes, which are incredibly important. So a couple of questions. One's on recognising the impact of cross-subsidy element of the builds, and how does this fit with the sustainable communities priority of the housing strategy that we've just agreed? What are you learning from places like Wandsworth, who are borrowing to build 100% social housing? Can you explain how this was considered and discounted, and what cost-benefit analysis around borrowing to build council homes was considered? And how will you ensure that the 75% social housing is delivered by developers, and the commitment to the same standard of those homes within those developments between private and social tenants, such as no separate entrances and things like that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garbett. I may come back to Councillor Nicholson, part of the response, just where you finished off the point about sustaining shared quality, not ending up with poor doors, our commitment to quality. When we're talking about the 2 council development programmes that we predominantly lead on our own housing land, it would be exactly as we have at the moment. You know, when you go to King's Crescent, when you go to Bridge House, when you go to Frampton Park, there is that tenure blind nature of what we build, whether you're a private owner, a shared owner, Hackney Living Rent, or council rent. You saw, I didn't mention the design awards in my quick canter through awards winning, but you know, Frampton Park has won national awards and also won awards here at the council. If you go to the Taylor and Chato and the other sites there, you'll very clearly see that you couldn't tell them apart, and that is embedded in the principles that we have around all of our delivery and our design standards. Clearly, when we're talking about mixed-use schemes in our town centres, that will have a degree of complexity, but again, we'll be taking those principles forward and through. It's not our intention to dispose of sites on our existing estates or work in a different way in terms of delivery. So again, that certainty that we have around quality of architecture and design. I've got some stuff to say about Wandsworth, but I know that Deputy Mayor Nicholson has. Obviously, a fantastic new Labour administration ending decades of underinvestment in the social infrastructure of Wandsworth, and fully welcome the passionate way in which they've articulated their housing ambition. The 2 things that I would say is they also have the highest council rents in the country. They're about £30 a week on average per home, higher than Hackney council rents. That means that the degree of flexibility and financial stability that their housing revenue account and their reserves position are very different than where we are, where we have some of the lowest rents in the country, certainly in London, for our social housing rents. And if you think about the other things that we're doing with our housing revenue account, thinking about retrofit, thinking about damp and mould investment in our existing stock, the challenge of fire safety, all of that is being done by the same flexibility around finance as our new development. And while we may, in theory, have no debt cap anymore on our HRA, we have to be able to sustain that borrowing and investment within it. And that is why there's still a role for the cross-subsidy model, but obviously that extra investment. I'll hand over to Deputy Mayor Nicholson to work through the Wandsworth. I would just say, in terms of this cross-subsidy housing, I don't believe there's a negative impact about building private housing in the borough. and all of our schemes to some degree or other have been mixed. I think that adds to their viability, their sustainability, and there is also still an acute need for all types of housing. While the priority for the borough in this report and in terms of our delivery is new council housing, there is also a housing crisis that is a shortage of supply of all types of housing, and we should be proud to be delivering the housing figures. And I think there's a report going to audit committee about our planning delivery of housing, but we have a proud record of delivering across all. And I think we're the only party represented in this chamber this evening that actually supports council house delivery out in the wards and on the ground when it comes to elections. But, you know, Deputy Mayor Nicholson, I want to add more.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. I mean, I think that was a very kind of thorough kind of resume of the Wandsworth dynamic. But suffice it to say, I think the new Labour Council in Wandsworth is clearly, Councillor Gabbett, making full use of the money that had been salted away for many, many years and allowed to accumulate and not be spent on residents and tenants of the council in Wandsworth. They are now moving forward with a very bold and ambitious plan to deploy that accumulated wealth that the previous council administration had built up and actually invest it into the community that they were elected by. And one obviously kind of wishes them all of the best in delivering. And I hope that over the coming 4 years, there will be some very, very, very happy residents in the London Borough of Wandsworth. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we happy to agree the report? Fantastic news. Thank you so much for officer colleagues that have joined in person and online, and really do thank you for all of your work in getting to this stage. And we made it by the end of the year, so thanks very much. And look forward to the complicated task of delivering 1,000 new homes, at least. Thanks, everyone. Item 13 is the flood risk management plan. Councillor Coburn. Councillor Garbutt as well. Oh. Indeed. Just in time. I've delivered you to living in Hackney just in time. Take care.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is obviously incredibly important, partly because, you know, London and Hackney is facing very different times, living through a climate emergency. We've seen obviously the impacts of climate change right on our doorstep, with more flooding that's happening, more extreme weather conditions, and obviously the impact that has on our communities, including very intensive sort of rainfalls. So, you know, as a lead authority, obviously our duty is to both strategically is to be able to respond to flooding events. What this paper seeks to do is to set out a flood management plan, and it sets out to look at sort of strategically how we're going to respond to such events, and it's seeking to approve 11 sets of measures that we're going to be looking at, sort of exploring further, and that's around, you know, how do we make sure that we have a robust flood risk strategy. It's about, you know, a response plan. It's about what we're doing at a number of different critical areas that we've identified. The flood risk management plan, you would have seen that we've depaved 150 square meters of hard standing areas, which resulted in having more than 2,000 square meter plus of surface water runoff draining into a sustainable system instead of the public sewage pipe network, which obviously shows the success of the cycle 1, and hopefully through the cycle 2 of this strategy piece of work over the next 5 years, we can achieve much more greater results, but as set out on the paper.
Thanks very much, Councillor Coburn, and again, thank you to the cross-cutting piece of work that involved several of us from the Cabinet side and officers. I have a London Council's Pan-London interest in flood management and surface water flooding as Chair of Transport and Environment Committee. I declare that just for the record, I don't think it in any way impacts, and actually it's about the links between the work we're doing at borough level, Pan London, and our partners like Thames Water TfL, the Thames Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. Some huge opportunities in the future, I hope, to link this plan with new funding sources for sustainable urban drainage, the Environment Agency, the new partnership that is being built between London Councils, the GLA, the RFCC, Thames Water, and others, I think, to make Hackney, through this plan and through that funding and the partnerships we build, real sector leaders and borough leaders on this agenda. And we know that's incredibly important for all the reasons that you set out. And, you know, we've been discussing this through about 3 different seasons, I think, only this year, of the risk of summer, almost tropical rain, the autumn rain and leaf fall that we saw only a few weeks ago. And today we've had the snow. And the challenges there. So I think all of that combined shows just how important this piece of work is. And I know that we've updated a lot of our sort of response on the ground based on the journey to get to this strategic document. It looks like you want to come back in, Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really just to encourage everyone to look at the sort of the 11 sets of actions that we'll be taking. There are some real practical things that we'll be doing, including, for example, by 2025, introducing a practice guide to make sure that our basement properties are more resilient, for example. We know that those have been really sort of at risk when we've had the floods, but also the council have been, you know, amazing in responding, literally in a matter of hours, getting things sorted and, you know, responding. And it's very difficult in such circumstances, as they did yesterday with the snow as well. So just a massive thank you to everyone for all their work.
Thanks very much. Are we happy to agree the report? Okay with that? Great. It's 3 papers in a row from the
Indeed, appropriation of land for planning purposes, which sounds estate and to the de Beauvoir estate too. So 3 very different communities around the borough, 3 very different locations, all with their own challenges. But the common thread through all of this is the delivery of over 400 new homes. And between these 3 particular sites, this is an important step, as you rightly pointed out, in the due process of moving the developments forward. These are clearly unrelated to the previous item that you introduced, Mayor Glanville, around the building of 1,000 new social rent council homes. This is in addition. These are historic decisions that were made over the course of the last administration of this council and of your mayoral administration, and they are now coming forward, even in these challenging times where the construction industry, like many sectors in the UK economy, are really challenged by rising prices, like all of us at the moment, and they are no exception at all. But officers of the council are determined, focused, and a big thanks to all of the officers who have been diligently pursuing all of these 3 items over the course of the last couple of years to get us to this point. So with that, if I may, Glanville, perhaps, and just suggest that item 14 item 15 and item 16 are all three as set out, and all three commended to Cabinet for the relevant approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to make sure we take each decision separately, but take that introduction as read. Again, for the purposes of public record, officers in the room that we've already thanked for their work on the broader paper, and there are colleagues joining us again online for these items. And again, as Councillor Nicholson, Deputy Mayor Nicholson suggested, they have a good hinterland in terms of the work that's happened to date. They also all have distinct exempt appendix 22, 23 and 24. If colleagues want to discuss those exempt items, we would do that at the end of the meeting. If people are content to bundle them all up now and we don't need to discuss them publicly, then that is also fine. So item 14, are we happy to agree? Item 14, agreed. Item 15 is Frampton Park, appropriation of land for planning purposes. Are we happy to agree? Thank you. And item 16, de Beauvoir Estate Phase 1, appropriation of land for planning purposes. Agreed. Great work. Thank you. So item 17 is the Gender and Ethnicity Pay Gap 2022. Councillor Williams was in the chamber, but is now online and happy to, I think, introduce the item online. So I'll hand over to Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it best that I'd not disrupt the meeting any longer, so I came into the office. So the gender and ethnicity pay gap is something that we've seen a number of times now. The council is required to publish information relating to the differences in pay between men and women, and we've been doing so since 2018 as part of the government regulations under the Equality Act. And to do so, we publish annually on the council website and on a dedicated central government site. My voice is going to go, Chair, so you may need to take over. The gender pay gap has continued to narrow each year since we started to publish it. This is the narrowest gap that we've had. The gender pay gap remains in favour of women based on the average pay, and there is no gender pay gap when using the median hourly rate. It is minus 0.98 as measured by the mean, or 0% as measured by the median. The measure more typically is used in the median. Just a note for the record, the pay gap does not indicate that women are paid more than men in any particular job. The council operates a nationally recognised and equality-proof pay and grading scheme, and it is confident that the same job for men and women are paid equally. The difference is because of in the highest quartiles, there are a higher proportion of women than men. It's 53.42% versus 46.58% in 2020. On the
Councillor Williams, do you want to just take a pause and then maybe a drink of water before? There's no need to rush through when moving on to the next part of the ethnicity pay gap.
Thank you. There is no requirement to publish an ethnicity pay gap, but the council has taken the decision to undertake the analysis, despite the fact that the government announcements makes it unlikely to be required by law to do so anytime soon. I'm very conscious, as our officers in the council, that there remains an underrepresentation of certain communities in our workforce. And there is still underrepresentation of staff from culturally and ethnically diverse communities at senior levels. The council is committed to taking practical action to address these disparities. In the report pack, it shows that there is a pay gap in favour of white employees of 14.90% as measured by the mean and 15.15% as measured by the median. Again, the measure is more typically used, the measure more typically used is the median. Sorry.
Thank you. Are you happy?
I'm just going to go on and say one last,
Yep.
a couple more points around the cost of living crisis and the lasting effects of COVID pandemic, which has exposed and exacerbated inequalities in society. And the council knows that the impacts have been not being felt equally amongst our communities. This makes it more important than ever that the council understands the pay gaps and examines every aspect of our services, including recruitment and retention practices, as well as our workplace policies to ensure that the council is as inclusive as possible. And finally, we have published our anti-racist action plan online, as part of which the council creates an inclusive leadership training programme to improve diversity in the workplace, to improve ethnic and cultural diversity of senior leadership of the council. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and a Herculean effort. Do rest your voice, and I hope colleagues, I do really appreciate you making the introduction. Any questions or comments on the report? And we're noting it, and then it goes to full council in January, I think. Is that correct? I'm seeing nodding.
That's correct.
So we note it, and then we pass it on to full council in January. Thanks very much indeed. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Very patiently, Deputy Mayor Bramble, appointment of local authority governors. I've checked. I've never knowingly heard of the person, so I don't think there's any personal declarations as sometimes we get. So hand over to you, Deputy Mayor Bramble.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. So just highlighting the new appointment of the governor at Hagton School of Matt is not known to myself, and I don't think either colleagues across the room. We always take the opportunity to thank our work in schools and the work that governors do and the valuable contribution they make. I know some of you as elected members, our governors on school have been or continue to be, so thank you for that work. We thank the school community and all the governors for all that they do. But as I'm talking about education, Mayor Glanville, I take this opportunity to talk about children and young people. And in the list of accolades of Hackney, I still have another award to add. It's the Children and Young People's Now Award 2022 for the Workforce Development Award. And Hackney Council are the winners of that award. And I really want to thank children and education and children's social care for the work that they're doing. And the work was for the anti-racist practice work that we do. And Mayor Glanville, you know, because you've been in meetings and you too have said this as well, we do challenge our staff to be comfortable being uncomfortable talking about race. And every time I put out that challenge, our staff team has risen to the challenge. And now an outside entity acknowledges the work that they are doing. It isn't easy work, but they take it on because they want to deliver, not just because they want to win awards or be a staff team that's been known to lead good practice. They do it because they feel that our children and families deserve nothing less than to be part of an anti-racist council. And it feeds into the work that's led by Councillor Williams, that's online, and the action plan that we have. And we will continue to forge till we have a more equal society that holds the values that we hold dear and champion here in Hackney. Thank you.
Thank you. And here firmly, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Are we happy to agree the appointment and note that another award? Agreed and noted. It would be remiss of me, and I nearly bought the Sunday Times yesterday to find out whether this is true, but we have a really good comms team with a roundup. The Mossbourne Community Academy is the best non-selective school in the country, which I think we can be firmly proud of. So again, thanks to education colleagues, it's a team effort, but also to Mossbourne for that award and accolade. That brings us to broadly a close. There are no new items of unrestricted business, and because we've been through all of the relevant cabinet reports with their attached exempt appendix, I'm not proposing to go through them all, and there was no indication that colleagues wanted to debate or discuss the contents. So we've been able to stay on track. All that I want to note is future meeting dates. So we'll see us all in a bright new 23rd of January 2023 meeting. So 23/1/23, which is always nice when it comes to dates. Merry Christmas, everyone watching at home, and hopefully a restful break over the Christmas and Hanukkah period. And we'll see everyone back in 23. And thanks to all the officers that have joined us and helped with the papers this evening. Thank you.